Okay, so we did number 12, where it said, so what about your classroom? Will you teach for one or the other or both? We decided that we would teach for relational understanding, just because of basically the reasons that the author said, so that students will have a deeper understanding of it, and because it really is easier in the long run, I think, for just about everybody to to understand it and then be able to apply that understanding to a wide range of topics instead of having to memorize a whole bunch of little rules.
And then when we were talking about that, we were asking each other, and you guys can answer this too, for when you're teaching, is it necessary for students to have instrumental understanding prior to relational, or if you are teaching relationally, will the instrumental understanding somewhat be included already? Does that make sense? Does that have her opinion? I think we agreed that if you were to teach for relational understanding, that the instrumental would be included, but that's just our opinion.
And then towards the end of the article, he said something about in order for teachers to teach relationally, they're going to have to rethink everything they've been taught because we've been taught instrumentally. And so, that just made me think of a couple weeks ago when John said something about how most teachers, regardless of what they're taught about teaching, still just teach the way they were taught. And so, Ellen said it it's easier in the long run for everybody, but I think that in the beginning, if you want to be a relational teacher, you're going to have to put a lot more effort into redoing how you understand things, how you understand how to teach things, and then from there it'll get easier and better for everybody.
We talk a lot about the amount of effort that it takes for a teacher to teach relation with the relation emphasis, but what about the amount of time it would take the students? Because that's one thing we're not really taking into consideration is you have a set time schedule that you have to teach this subject matter, and this whole theory as well, it's better to teach with the relation emphasis, but is it feasible to get it done in the time frame that you have? And nobody knows this.
I kind of think that, I know that we have state standards. We talked about this a little bit before, I think, but we have state standards that we're going to have to meet for testing and things. But I think that if they understand, if you can only get through 75% of what you have to teach, if they all understand all 75% of it relationally, then I feel like they're going to test better on it than if they understand, 100% of it instrumentally. Yep. Does that make sense?
But what are you going to say when the person that needed that 25% that got left out came back and said, you know what, that could really help me in life? Thanks for that teaching.
Then you would have to explain to them why relational learning is better.
Well, I think when you focus on relational thinking, you can work other things out just by kind of thinking about them as well. Where if you just learn something instrumentally, okay, this formula works for this. Okay, well, what happens when the example isn't exactly like that formula? You're gonna have to figure out stuff in your own way, differently. And lots of times, you won't be able to unless you know the reasoning why that formula worked for that case, and you can figure out why maybe a different formula would work for a different one.
You know how different people are better test takers than others, and you go to take the ACT, but not everybody has had all the material that's covered on the ACT, especially in math. And so, but if you understand things relationally, I feel like you can apply more of it and get closer to an answer without having been specifically taught that something, so I feel like you have a better chance if you have a relational understanding of everything that goes behind it, of understanding what comes next by yourself, than if you just learn everything instrumentally.
Do you think it's necessary that you have to teach every aspect of mathematics relationally? For example, in the article, they were talking about one of the advantages of instrumental mathematics is that it's usually easier to understand, such as why multiplying a negative number times a negative number is a positive number. People do need to know that, but do you think they need to know why that's true? People who are going into, I don't know, agriculture or something like that, do you think they need to understand the proof behind understanding, or at least the reason behind understanding why a negative number times a negative number is a positive number? Or I was just wondering if you had any categories in mind that you thought that weren't nearly as important to go into as much relational detail as instrumental detail.
I think lots of times, if something's, if it's relational, let's see, if it's relational, like maybe the reasoning behind how something works, it might be too complex for them to know. It might be something really abstract, or it might be something that needs like
Right.
higher calculus that they're not going to have for another 4 or 5 years. So it's kind of, it would be really difficult to teach them why it works until they've had more background.
Okay. So you think like there are like certain points where you're like, okay, up until this point, it's okay if you just know that a negative times a negative is positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why is a negative times a negative?
No.
You're adding a negative
It's
number,
something we
negative
learned,
times.
right? Like, yeah, like instrumental.
I feel like things like that, I don't know. I mean, I guess they seem like inconsequential because there's no,
Right.
like something, like taking derivatives, it would be like really helpful to know like actually what it is, you know,
Mhm.
and than to just say like, oh, it's 3, you know, like you take the power, you do the power rule or whatever. Like, I think it's really helpful to like do the limit thing first, but I don't.
But the negative one, right.
Yeah.
That's what I was
I was just wondering, like, with the graph, I don't remember which group that was, how it's basically saying that when you're younger, you ask more why, and older, you ask less. You guys said that you wanted to do more relational teaching. Do you think that as students got older, if they were taught more relational, would they be more open to asking whys?
I think they would because if you're going to like teach students relational learning, they'll probably like it'll be tougher for them at first to have to understand like these big concepts and and like give them your test on those concepts, like ask them the whys, then they'll probably ask because they won't know. So I think if you're teaching for relational understanding, like the whole like dynamic of your classroom is going to have to be different. It's going to have to be more discussion based, so people do feel comfortable asking why, and that you've lost, like the teacher will expect it, and students will expect it to have to go both ways. So hopefully, yes, they would feel more comfortable asking why.
I feel like this class is actually a pretty good example of that because the first week of class we didn't, even at the beginning of class, like it even takes us a little bit during class to warm up to it, but like even just how many questions you guys have been asking us like shows because we're practicing it more. This is a relational understanding class because we need to understand it relationally to teach it to our students. So, but we're getting more practice at asking why, even throughout this class period. So I feel like that's kind of a testament to itself.
Okay.
I almost feel like oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I almost feel like there has to be like this whole educational movement. Like, there's going to have to be this huge shift in how teachers, if we want to educate our students to think like relationally, like all of us are going to have to start teaching relationally, and it can't just be like scattered classes throughout their whole, school career. And so I didn't know like if you guys had any thoughts on like how that can happen. If like the whole, state and nation has to kind of change, the standards and things like that.
That's true. But it's a good question. It's something I don't have any answer for. I mean, the best we can do is be the best teacher we can be. I don't know.
Just because like how you were saying, like we are going to teach kind of how we were taught, and it's just going to be like this never-ending cycle.
Well, you need like if one group, like if you all teach relationally, then like, then maybe the students will be more curious, like for the whys, like to know why things work when they get to the next class. Maybe, I don't know, and then they'll want to know, so they'll ask and kind of force the teachers to teach relationally. Maybe that's just really realistic. I don't know.
I also feel like if you can go into your classroom and teach relationally and prove that it works, then other teachers are going to be more like, it's like you got to start small and then somebody else is going to see that it works and then start, even at Allendale, they're doing, a couple of math teachers next trimester are starting to do like the flipped classroom thing where they do homework in class and the lecture at home. And so they're trying it out with 2 classrooms, and if it works for those 2 classrooms, then they're going to make the whole math department do it. So like that's, you got to start small and work your way up. And then eventually, yeah, it'll snowball until the students have been taught relationally, so they're going to teach relationally too. If you can get it.
Okay.
Did you
I'm
have a
gonna go
question?
now. Yes, I did.
This is like going back to like time limits and, you know, like curriculum and stuff. So, you know, when you're taking tests and everyone has like their standard tests through all the grade levels, and you know that material is going to be on the test, so do you sacrifice teaching relationally to make sure that you get everything that's on that test, especially because like if we're going to be not graded but evaluated on our test scores? I mean, what do you do in that situation?
I think it's tough. No matter, I mean, that might have to be something that we all figure out on our own, because I don't have a clear-cut answer for it, you know?
I could be wrong, but like I feel like we're almost overemphasizing like how much more time it would take to teach relationally. Because I think it's like we're all thinking about it now is like if we teach instrumentally and then teach relationally and whatever, like with the teachers that would do that now, it would take all this extra time because the students aren't going to want to grasp it. They don't really care at that point. You've already taught them what they needed to know, so therefore they have no reason to pay attention. But I feel like all my teachers that taught the reverse and actually taught you relationally, like you were talking about, and led into instrumental, it takes the same amount of time. You just combine the lessons. So it really doesn't take that much longer. It might take a little bit more effort on the teacher's part and like reorganizing how they teach, but I feel like it's not actually going to, I don't know, like if all the teachers that I've had, we didn't like miss anything out of the book. Like we still covered everything in the allotted amount of time. We didn't slow down. We didn't, like it's, I feel like we're overemphasizing how much more time it takes just because most people don't do it. But it's, if we actually redid our teaching system, then I feel like it wouldn't be as big a deal as it's being made.
I guess when we're talking about it taking more time, like I was thinking on the part of the teacher outside of school, like lesson planning is going to take a lot longer and figuring out that, you know, I feel like that's what I was considering taking more time, not necessarily in the classroom, because I feel like especially once your students get used to your style of teaching, they're going to pick it up just as quickly, but they would have to get used to it first.
Thank you very much.